And we're back here on Patriots No Huddle, brought to you by PatsFans.com. Derek Havens, Steve Balestrieri, Mike Diabate. Here we are talking about the quarterbacks, running backs, and offensive linemen today in our draft preview, getting ready for the 2026 NFL draft, which is less than 4 weeks away, gentlemen. We are right inside crunch time. Mike, glad you could join us today, buddy. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. It's always great to be talking football with you fine people on a Saturday morning. Thank you to everyone joining us live on Twitter. We appreciate that. And hopefully you're joining us live or joining us in the replay on YouTube. But hard to believe that we are less than 1 month away from the 2026 NFL draft. Time flies, especially when you're an NFL football fan. And this year for the Patriots, it's flying even faster.
It does, Mike, because we've talked about the draft pretty much, and it was free agency, trades, draft talk as soon as the season ended for the Patriots, just given how far they went last year. You weren't on the show. You were unable to join us last week, and we started the draft preview off talking about receivers and tight ends, and we're going to go through, again, quarterbacks, running backs, offensive linemen today. We're going to get into defensive players next week, and then we'll get into, a deeper dive into some of these of our favorite players, do mocks before the draft starts. So we have plenty coming up here on Patriots No Huddle. We're excited to, continue that draft content, but I wanted to give you the floor quickly before I go over to Steve and get into our discussion. Mike, any leftover thoughts on receivers, tight ends? I know you had done some writing in advance to today's show on some of those players.
Yeah, ironically, my mailbag question and answer session is out on SI right now as we speak. If you guys want to go ahead and check that out. And our good friend, our mutual friend, had a tight endage question, and I think you know who I'm talking about. The illustrious Countess of Clare Cooper, over in West Midlands in the UK. Hi, Claire. I'm sure she's watching. Bottom line, tight endage is her jam, and she wanted to find out my thoughts. And I think we're like-minded in this situation, and judging by the discussion that you and Steve had last week on that, we are very much like-minded. Look, Max Clare, I think, is someone that would be a great fit here in New England. Pass-catching tight end, he's got the hands, the route-running ability, the ability to create separation at the position that you don't normally see in high-end tight end prospects that are really pro-ready when they come out of the box and they're ready to contribute. So, in my opinion, this kid could really come in here, be a solid contributor right from day one. He's got the Ohio State synergy with Mike Vrabel, so that always counts for something. He's made some improvements as a blocker. I think he'd still need a little bit of work in that regard. But if you're looking for someone to come in and to help move this offense along, Max Clare is a guy that I would definitely keep an eye on. The other seems to be working his way very much up draft boards all throughout the NFL draft landscape, but really when it comes to the New England Patriots, and Steve, Derek, you both mentioned him the other day. I know you have a lot of affinity for this gentleman, and that's Oscar Delp. 6'5", 245, well-sized for the position. He looked great alongside Hunter Henry. Athletic pass catcher, elite speed. Steve, we were talking about this before we hit record. A 4.49 in the 40-yard dash at that size, that's lightning. And if you can harness that, and you got a star in the making that could be a potential difference maker in this offense, Oscar Delp is a name that you want to keep an eye on. So those are the guys that I'm excited about from a tight end perspective, and we'll see what happens in the future for the New England Patriots. But those are two guys that I wouldn't mind seeing wearing Patriot blue when training camp opens in July.
100%. I'm glad you highlighted those. Were two players we discussed ad nauseum in last week's episode. Delp, again, I think underutilized, as you mentioned, and you can really see the transition to what his college career looked like to what his projection is going to be at the pros. And that's really what you want to see, is the projection and how they're going to fit. And I think in a Josh McDaniels offense, I think that he could definitely take that next step. And with that athletic profile, his competitiveness, I can see a situation where if he's in the right situation, wherever he lands in the league, I think that you can talk about a player that can really take his game to another level. So both guys, I think, are absolutely deserving of those shout-outs. So I'm glad you mentioned them, and I wanted to give you the opportunity to bring up a couple of guys, again, since you weren't able to join us last week. So those are two great names. Steve, what's up, man? How are you doing, bud? Glad to have you here. Any thoughts on what Mike just shared?
No, I'm in firm agreement with them. Look, I think when it comes to tight ends, and we'll talk more about that coming up, but there's several really good ones that the Patriots could utilize. And look, when it comes to guys who fit in Foxborough, I think there's quite a few, and it'll be intriguing to see, how the draft plays out. I'm excited about it. I think we all are, because I think they're going to go after one of those kind of guys who's a dynamic receiving kind of guy. So it's going to be fun.
100%. And you'd think, we go through every position in this pre-draft process, because as it's the first time we're doing a draft preview, as we're venturing out, and Patriots No Huddle, and we did the rebrand months ago. We've been moving forward, but Steve and I have been doing this for 15 years, near about going through guys. And
This will be 16 years.
yeah, who's counting? And and Mike, we're interested to get your thoughts as we go ahead and talk about some of these guys. And you'd think that you wouldn't necessarily want to talk about quarterbacks in some capacity, but I think it's important to talk about all position groups every single year, because it's really about the deeper dive into not only the players that are coming out, but also kind of doing a team inventory on what you currently have on the roster. And I think if we start with the quarterbacks, obviously you look at Drake May, the Patriots have their guy. You're not worried about the Patriots finding a franchise quarterback right now. And obviously that's a very, very good position to be in when you're in the NFL. But Joshua Dobbs is no longer going to be the backup here. They give Tommy DeVito that 2-year contract with a significant pay increase. I mean, I wouldn't say he's necessarily like overpaid, but obviously got a jump in salary, and I think that speaks to where the team sees his role in the future. But when you're talking about quarterbacks, or when you're talking about the roster, let me back up here. We're talking about the Patriots roster, guys. You're going to add at least one more quarterback. You're not going into camp with two. I would imagine it's going to be a situation where they draft a quarterback. But again, it could be one of those situations where they have a guy on a couple of players, and maybe there's a veteran out there that they pivot to if one of their guys doesn't fall to them at any point in the draft. The conversation to me then shifts to what kind of player, a quarterback, would the Patriots draft? And to me, I put it into two different categories. Mike, I want your thoughts, and Steve as well. And I'll phrase it like this. I think with the quarterback position, you could draft a traitsy quarterback like a Joe Milton, and you're banking on a guy with some of these elite measurables and traits that you're hoping can put it all together under the right tutelage. And if you can capture that lightning in a bottle, you can potentially flip those picks for later, later down the line, and who knows what you find. Then you could be looking to maybe draft more of a player that maybe has it more put together, but the ceiling's not as high, but you could look at him as more of a long-term backup, and they could be looking at it and say, we need to draft a young guy that's going to be developed into this system, that if Drake May goes down with injury, knock on wood, we have a guy in waiting for the next decade who can grow with May as the quarterback too. And, maybe the ceiling's not as high, but the floor is higher. And so it's not as much of a volatile projection as maybe the traitsy quarterback would be. So, Mike, over to you. Do you agree with that assessment of kind of those two lanes? And if not, what would you add to it? And which direction do you think the Patriots could go as they're evaluating the quarterback position right now?
No, I think you're right on the money. I think there are definitely advantages to looking at a quarterback that does bring a whole lot to the table, a tremendous amount of skill set, maybe a raw skill set that needs to be refined. A couple of the quarterbacks that I have my eye on in this draft, you can probably put into that category. Guys that will fit the mold, so to speak, in terms of athletic, dual threat type quarterbacks that need some work in terms of their fundamentals, but would be, I think, maybe a solid complement to what Drake May brings to the table and what Tommy DeVito brings to the table. And that's a dual threat style. You don't want to stray too far from the formula when you're bringing in a quarterback, because you want a guy that can come in, provide continuity, and provide the same type of gameplay that the guy he's succeeding ran so well in front of you, and that's Drake May. You don't want to reinvent the wheel if you don't have to. So I think the Patriots are going to try to stick to that method in that regard. And I think by doing so, bringing in maybe someone that just checks the boxes in terms of athleticism or size or aesthetically pleasing prowess, maybe a little short-sighted. I think the Patriots go to the opposite end of the spectrum where you were talking about before in finding someone that not necessarily is the most athletic or the most high-profile fit, but the right fit for this team, because let's not kid ourselves. This is probably guys coming in that's going to be the emergency third quarterback or maybe a third stringer if the Patriots decide to. He might be the guy that's leading the scout team. He might even be a practice squatter if the Patriots decide they only want to roster 2 quarterbacks like they did last year and have Tommy come in as the emergency third quarterback. I think DeVito is going to be your number 2, and I think he will be all season long. So there's the question. There's where the Patriots need to be careful, because the guy that you bring in, if he's not a veteran that's expecting that role and he's a young quarterback that's expecting to play more, then you run that risk of having that type of Joe Milton situation where he wanted to try to shoot his way out of town to get more playing time. It's a very fine line that the Patriots got to walk right now. It may seem insignificant, but it can have a ripple effect on the roster if it's not managed properly right from the get-go.
My fault. Steve, why don't you throw in your 2 cents on the topic?
I was like, wait a minute, I can't hear anything. No,
worries. Throw in your 2 cents on what Mike just shared.
Yeah, I totally agree. Look, I think you don't want to stray too far from, what you have right now, because you want to be, if you want a developmental quarterback who fits in with what you're doing right now. And so I think you want a guy that's going to be athletic enough that he can take off and run if he has to and move around the pocket, extend plays, because that's what worked for them last year and it's working for Drake May. But at the same time, if you find a guy like, and I don't think it'll be early in the draft, if you find a guy in the middle to late rounds that fits, your profile for a developmental guy, it may not be, maybe he's a pocket guy, but he's what you consider really good and with a lot of upside, then yeah, I could see them potentially taking a guy like that. But I agree with Mike. I think they're going to stick with what they got, that kind of a football player, and I think it works for them and it works for this offense.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So if we jump into the quarterback prospects, there's 2 at the top that are worth talking about for the first round quarterbacks, which is obviously Fernando Mendoza, who is the number 1 overall pick. I would say projected, but what's the point? So he'll be the number 1 overall pick to the Las Vegas Raiders. And then you have Ty Simpson from Alabama. Now, I think he's an interesting discussion. For the sake of the show, because it's a Patriots podcast, we don't really have to break it down because it's not extremely pertinent to whether we think he can play or not, as much as the fact that it does impact the Patriots with him because of where he's projected to be selected. Because he does project to be selected either somewhere in the late first round or maybe early second round. And to me, that does open up the door for teams that are in a similar position to the Patriots, the last few picks of the first round, to be receiving calls from teams to potentially move back into the first round come draft night here in a few weeks. And, you're sitting at 31. If a team approaches you and you move back 4 or 5 picks and you can pick up some extra draft capital to move those second and third round picks up potentially and get 2 picks higher together. So, because that where the meat of the draft really is in day 2, I think that's intriguing. Obviously, there's a lot of interest of teams wanting to move up to not only make sure they secure the player they want, but when you're talking about teams moving back into the first round, ever since the rookie 5th-year option became part of rookie contracts, it's totally shifted the way teams look at some of these back end players. And sometimes that actually can push a certain player up, especially when you're talking about quarterbacks, because the way the market is with quarterbacks, teams want that 5th-year option in their pocket for quarterbacks before they have to pay market value, or if they need an extra year of evaluation time to know if they're going to commit $50 million a year to these quarterbacks. So it's important. And I do think it's on the table for the Patriots to move back a couple of spots potentially. Mike, would you be open to that depending on the package? Or I'm not. I guess it's a really hard discussion to have over podcast again, because it's all dealt in hypotheticals. But can you envision a scenario, and what would your thoughts be on that?
Yeah, I mean, you have to be open to any and all scenarios if you're a GM. And I'm sure Elliot Wolf would probably give you the canned response about every single opportunity that comes across our desk. We're going to consider it, and we're going to do what's best for the football team. In a way, he's being very truthful. I don't mean to disparage Elliot when I say that. He's giving you the soundbite of what everyone wants to hear. But the gist of what he's saying is indeed true. You have to consider every option, because every option is, even if it's laughable, it's still a consideration. It lets you know what you don't want as much as what you do want. And sometimes that's even more important heading into a draft. So, yeah, to answer your question, I'm listening. I'm all ears when it comes to the 31 overall pick, whether it's to move it, whether it's to use it on a player we're going to discuss in a little bit, whether it's to use it on a player you guys discussed the other day. There is an intrinsic value to first-round picks, and there always will be. Simpson is an interesting prospect to me because I don't think he's going to be there at 31. I don't think that the player that we saw work out this past week, and that the player that there's a good amount of film on playing in a high-profile program, is going to dip to 31. Quarterbacks are at such a premium, and teams are so quarterback hungry. Even the teams you don't think are quarterback hungry believe they are. And they're going to do everything that they can to secure their future. If there's any doubt, in any way, shape, or form, that the guy under center or the guy taking snaps in their system is not the guy, if there is any shred of doubt, then teams are always going to keep their options open. And that's why I think Ty ends up going off the board before that. You might see teams leapfrog the Patriots at that number 31 and try to get up and try to make that pick. That, to me, is where this is pertinent for the Patriots. Who does he end up with? Where does he go? How much does it affect the landscape of the AFC or the NFC, depending on where he is? So, to me, I think that's the more pertinent of the question when it comes to Ty right now. But anything and everything is always on the table. But, yeah, I don't think teams will be trading with the Patriots for 31 to take him, because I think he's going to be gone before that.
Yeah, I think that's certainly on the table. Steve, I mean, if you disagree, then feel free to add. But if you do agree with Mike, I kind of wanted to shift gears and ask you a different question. What would be the earliest situation that you would envision the Patriots taking a quarterback? Do you see any scenario where they take a quarterback on day 2? I don't, personally. So I think that you're looking at probably a day 3 prospect.
Yeah, I think the earliest you might see them take a quarterback would be the late 4th, 5th round, and even that, I think it's pushing it a little, unless again there's somebody there that they really like. And I do know they met with a guy, right, who's a dual threat quarterback, like we've been talking about. But going back to and we'll get into that. But anyway, going back to what Mike was talking about, Simpson, and Mike, I agree. I think Simpson will be gone by 31, but I think that he's going to fall into that kind of window where teams are kind of forcing it a little bit. Look, I think he has a lot of upside, right? I do. I watched him. I've always been a fan of Alabama. So, Alabama and South Carolina are the two teams I always watch their games. So, when I watched their games, and I saw a lot of what I like. But again, you're looking at a window, and if you're drafting again in the first round, I mean, he's going to be projected to play. I mean, I think, and it happens every all of a sudden, like Simpson was considered a round 2 guy, right? And now, especially like Dan Orlovsky was talking about how he's better than Mendoza. And I'm like, come on, you're talking yourself into this, And I do think Simpson's going to fall into that. Do I think he has a ton of upside? Absolutely. I think he's going to be really good. But, I don't think he's a first-round quarterback. But I think he's going to get taken in the first round because it happens every year.
I completely agree with you. Yeah, I agree.
Well, it's interesting with quarterbacks and tackles in this draft class specifically, because it's like you have those top tier guys, and then there's a gap, and there's a big gap, and we'll get to the tackles is pretty crazy, because it's like get a guy in the first round or wait until probably they won't. The projections will say that the league will wait until day 3. That won't happen. But like they're not going to make it through day 2 without any tackles being taken. But that's how when you're talking about player rankings in a class, it's like, okay, there's going to be 5 or 6 guys that go in the top 35, and then the next tackle's not going to be taken until pick 100 and something. And that's just not how that works. And it's like, for this class, it's like, okay, after Ty Simpson, is Drew Rowler from Penn State going to be the next guy? And if that's the case, I don't think he gets taken before the 3rd round. So where in the 3rd round does he go? And you're still talking about a pretty big gap at that point. So, he's an interesting player to me, Drew Rowler. I really liked him early on. I do think, obviously, the physical traits are there, the consistency in the game, the big moment questions. There are some limitations to his game. That is going to be a tough thing for him to kind of that's going to be a tough shadow from an evaluation for him to kind of step out of, unless that he's get put into a situation where he can kind of prove any doubters wrong, of course. But he's one of the first guys that I jumped into this class that kind of piques my interest, because I don't think he'll go in the 4th round, but I do think the earliest I could see the Patriots specifically taking a quarterback is round 4. And again, to share a similar thought with Steve, I still think that might be early for them. So I think you're looking at later. I think you're looking at later than that. So Mike, is there maybe two or 3 guys that you want to talk about for quarterbacks that you kind of are interested in for the Patriots, kind of in that day 3 range?
Yeah, one of them is probably a little bit of a long shot for a day 3 range, but I think he may end up falling, and that's Baylor's Sawyer Robertson. Robertson is a guy that has a tremendous arm, and he can beat you long way down the field without any question. 3,681 passing yards, 31 touchdowns to only 12 interceptions, so he protects the football well, and he doesn't make dumb decisions. 6'4", 216, that's a little lanky for a pro quarterback. You want to see him put on a little bit of muscle, a little bit of weight in order to be able to take some of the hits that he's going to take. But this kid can attack a defense vertically. Again, I think like any rookie quarterback, he's going to struggle with accuracy when he's going to be pressured. That is where a guy like Josh McDaniels may be the perfect Yoda to this kid. To try to give him what he needs in order to be able to break that a little bit, especially considering that right now it's still a situation where he's going through it a little bit with Drake May. So maybe these guys kind of get their feet wet together in a lot of ways, and he can learn from what Drake has really absorbed the last couple of years under Alex Van Pelt in his first year, and obviously last year under Josh, to make that step forward. Sawyer's got a lot of light on him because of the season that he had, so he may end up going off the board a little bit earlier. Another guy that I think fits a lot of that, but I think more of a dual threat than Sawyer Robertson, this is one I really am watching a little closely, is Haynes King out of Georgia Tech.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned
another
him.
guy that right now is lanky, and I'd like to see him put on some weight, but boy, can this kid win, not only from the pocket, but also when he has to roll out and take chances. This kid is very good at being a dual threat. He's got the statistics to back him up. 953 rushing yards, 15 touchdowns. He actually had 14 passing. He had 1 more on the ground than he did with his arms. So that should tell you that he likes to distribute his ability to both run and pass. So Once again, questionable decision making when he's under pressure, and I think you can probably put that on every rookie quarterback that's coming out of this class. But a guy like McDaniels can really help, and again, he fits that mold. He's a dual threat capability quarterback, just like Drake, just like Tommy DeVito. You put Haynes King in there, and all of a sudden, it really is kind of a pick 'em in terms of what you can do. Obviously, there's a much bigger chasm when it comes to skill level and it comes to what they can do on the field as a pro, but when it comes to skill set, these guys are similar enough where you can run the same type of offense and not have to reinvent the wheel. So a lot of negatives to Haynes King, but I think more positives there. I'd really keep a sharp eye on this kid heading into day 3 of the NFL draft.
Yeah, I think those are both. I think those are both really good names. And Robertson's interesting for a couple of different reasons. But the pro traits are there, the frame is there, the arm talent is there. And you talked about the season that he had, absolutely worth mentioning. Haynes King, I think, is absolutely another guy that is potentially a good option there too. Steve, you obviously feel free to mention or talk about any of those two guys, but is there another one or two guys that you wanted to bring to the table?
Yeah, I like those. Losing my earphones here. Anyway, yeah, I like those guys, Mike. Especially the kid from Baylor. I like that. But the guy that the Patriots have already met with, dual threat quarterback, Cole Payton out of North Dakota State.
Mm-hmm.
Talk about he's solid too. He's like 6'3" or 6'4", 230 pounds, but athletic freak. Now, again, you're talking about a developmental guy, right? Because he's really only had 1 year as a starter, at the FCS level. But the traits are all there. The talent level is there. He's going to take time. And as a third quarterback with the Patriots under Josh McDaniels, I think this kid he can check all the blocks that you want. And, where he's going to get drafted at, I think would be lower than those other guys that you mentioned. So I think that there won't be any rush or, pressure to get him involved much, at least as a rookie. But I really like the package of this guy. And again, he's a developmental guy. He's a project, right? So, he's going to have some rough spots, transitioning to the pro level, but that's okay because he's your number 3 guy. And but I really like what I see from him, and I think he'd be a great fit. And the fact that the Patriots already met with him kind of leads me to believe that they like what they see in this guy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's well said. I do someone this is not a Patriots pick for me, but I really have been more intrigued with LSU's Garrett Nussmeier as the process has gone on. He's very very interesting to me, and I do think he's put himself in position to be that third quarterback taken in the draft. So as you see his name pop up more and more, it's interesting. Carson Beck is kind of polarizing, just given kind of his career and the transfers and some of the stuff kind of around him as well. And then you can also look at there's a lot of quarterbacks in this draft, gentlemen, that again you're looking at when you're looking at quarterbacks. To me, you're looking at routes of their careers too, because you want to see a situation where you're like, does this kid how fast does he diagnose? How if you're running a system like a Josh McDaniels offense, you need a quarterback that has some that is higher up in his cerebral processing than some other guys need to be. It's not just kind of pitch and catch. And so the interviews are a huge process in this. And then again, it's like, I think there's a lot of kind of Baskin Robbins prospects, like, what's your favorite flavor in this draft, even though it's not really, let's say, the best talked about class in the world. But I do think it's interesting. Obviously, a lot of people have their eyes on 2027 quarterback class, and there'll be a lot to talk about next year. But I think it'll be interesting to see how the league views some of these guys. And what I'm leaning more towards is a day 3 player for the Patriots. And is it someone, like, are they looking for a dynamic athlete again, that they're banking on some raw potential that they can kind of unlock in the future? Or are they looking for someone that they can really kind of grow and develop within the system? And I think that's fascinating because it's an important position. Obviously, Drake is your guy, but you do want to have a backup plan there. So I think it's fascinating. As we shift gears to running backs, guys, running backs, very interesting conversation. We know about with what they have in Ramondre Stevenson. We talk about Travion Henderson, Antonio Gibson gets hurt, now off the team. I envision a scenario, Steve, where running back, maybe it's not a first, second round pick. I really don't even see a third round pick, although that's kind of where my range for that would kind of open up a little bit. I do think you're looking at more of a day 3 pick again for running back. Um, I think there's a lot of talented guys in this draft class. At the top, you have some you have some real nice talent in Love, who's just a tremendous player. But I do think there's a lot of guys that fit different systems. And again, similar to quarterback, depending on what you're looking for, uh, I think you can find a guy in this class that will suit those needs. Before we start the conversation, Steve, what do you see the Patriots needing to bring into the running back room?
Yeah. Look, they need a third running back. We know that. They're, behind, Travion Henderson and Ramondre really thin. There was a lot of hope for Lynn Larson last year in training camp. So, I mean, he doesn't have any experience. And, we'll see. I mean, they're bringing him back this year. We'll see how healthy. Huh?
Said it's going to be a big summer for him.
Yes, it is,
because it's going to be a big summer.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, there's a possibility he comes back, he's healthy, and he flashes again. But there's some good running backs in there, and I think when they're looking for that third guy, they're looking for a guy that can do a little bit of both, right? A guy that can run between the tackles like they like to do, and a guy that can pass block and catch the ball out of the backfield. And, there's plenty of those guys that are out there. Some of them aren't always the best pass blocking backs because they were too used to being the feature guy, and they weren't asked to do that. But there are complementary backs out there that I think that fit the bill.
Yeah, I think that's well said. Mike, what are your thoughts on the running back position?
Yeah, I think New England will at least kick the tires. And look, there's a couple of guys that I would give strong consideration to if they're around for a day 3 potential. The guy that I really love is Damon Claiborne out of Wake Forest. I think this kid has New England Patriot written all over him, and he ticks all the boxes of what they're going to need. Elite speed, this kid can blaze down the field with the best of them. And you talk about maybe missing a step a little bit, losing someone like an Antonio Gibson to complement the speed that Travion Henderson gives you at the top of the heap. This kid can do it. He can come in. He's got quickness. He's a good playmaker. You can watch him in a lot of situations, make something out of nothing. That's what the Patriots like in their running backs. And the kid can also be a special teams contributor as well, and a kickoff returner that could help to dispel some of the issues that they have there as well. So if the Pats are in the market, and I believe they will be, if Claiborne is sitting there on day 3, maybe even early on day 3, why wait? Why prolong the inevitable? Go ahead, bring this kid into the fold, especially, Steve, like you said, if they're a little squeamish about what Larison's going to be able to do coming back from the injury and whether or not that year off is going to set him back in his progression. Yeah, I think they do look at someone like that. So he could be a possibility. Le'Veon Moss out of Texas A&M is also someone that could come in, kind of flip the script a little bit. This guy's more of a power back, maybe a blunt force tool that the Patriots can use in certain downed situations. But, yeah, I think they are going to try to add a little flavor into the mix in their running back room because you got 2 strong backs at the top of the heap. when it comes to Ramondre Stevenson and Travion Henderson, Derek, like you said. But I think you look at what the Patriots are building and how they're building this roster in the offseason, bringing in someone like a Julian Hill, who's tremendous at being a run blocker, and guys that can really help spring that running game. Reggie Gilliam coming in to be a full-time fullback. They're looking to make this running game as complementary of a piece as you can possibly get. Maybe a 1-1A style with Drake May leading the passing game. You want competent backs in that room, and I think the Patriots are going to look to stack all they can into that room. And there are guys in this draft they can do it with.
Yeah, I think that's really well said, and it'll be interesting because I think if you look at, if you're looking at maybe the two Indiana running backs, I'll use an example, Roman Hemby and Kalen Black. Like, I could see a scenario where the Patriots maybe add a player like that, who are guys who are used to being in a rotation, guys with good balance, north-south kind of runners, but I could also see a scenario where they maybe try to look to add some more speed. They've been looking to add more dynamic playmakers on offense. They obviously want to add speed. I'll talk about the guy quickly that you mentioned, Mike. Starting off, you talk about Dre'Mont Claiborne. It's funny when you're watching him. There's no question in my mind. He knows that when he makes a decision and when he's running, his feet can move as quickly as his mind thinks. If he thinks I'm going left, his feet and hips can immediately go left. The problem sometimes with him is he moves so quickly. He doesn't have like that Le'Veon Bell kind of patience behind the line of scrimmage. He just kind of goes. And the problem is like, well, if you don't wait to set up your blocks, you're just kind of alone out there on an island. Now, the funny thing is given the fact that the Patriots do want to add more speed to the offense, and they obviously not opposed to just bringing in fast guys. Look at Travion Henderson last year, although I guess the discussion would be, do you want to add more speed or complement him, which is a fine discussion. But if you're talking about Claiborne specifically, talking about your fullback and your tight end, you're talking about guys that are literally they're hitting contact points almost from the jump as soon as the ball is snapped, so they can help spring Claiborne early because he can take it to the house at any time. So I just think when you mentioned him, I could see a scenario where they're like, we need more home run hitters, and we need to go ahead and get more speed on the field. We need to go ahead and lean on our running game, and we need to. I could see a scenario where they want to basically say, we have a dynamic young quarterback, and it's already going to stress defenses enough what he can do with his legs, how he can manipulate the pocket with his mobility. We already have to worry about him throwing darts 60, 70 yards down the field. Now, if we have a balanced, patient runner in Stevenson and some speed in Henderson, you add another guy to that mix. Again, could be a blend of either one or a specialty in either one of those things. Now you have to worry about the running game. You can't worry about the top, and you get some more dynamic weapons out there. It's impossible for the defenses to prepare for that kind of speed and space and those kind of offenses. And that's where I think you become really dangerous. And that's the exciting part about adding running backs here. And that's why I do think day 3 is kind of interesting. So, Steve, any guys that kind of piqued your interest that you haven't mentioned yet?
Yeah, well, I like the names you guys mentioned, and I've looked at those guys too, and the tape speaks for itself. One guy is kind of a sleeper. I think a late round guy, Adam Randall,
Yes,
running back out
he
of
was on my list.
Clemson. Now he's a bigger dude. He's like 230 pounds, but he's a converted wide receiver, which I love that. Right?
He's 6'3", 232, Steve. 32 and 3/8 inch arms. Just for people to know, he ran a 4.5.
That's good speed for a guy that's 232 pounds. And like I said, he's a converted wide receiver. And I think, like, if you're going to take a flyer on a guy on day 3, you bring him in. I think, you could see some intriguing traits there. He's one of the guys that I'm looking at. Like, I could see the wheels turning in Foxborough if they bring in a guy like this to see what he could do. And I think, look, I totally agree with you guys with the speed aspect, because I think we saw what Travion Henderson can bring to the table last year. I think we saw flashes of that all year long, but I think in year 2 he's going to really take off. And you can't say enough about that, because you just can't teach speed. Either guys have it or they don't. So no,
Yeah, no, I agree. I think,
I like all the names that we've talked about. And I think on day 3, if any of those guys are available, I don't think you can go wrong.
my only thing with Randall, Steve, because I did have him on my list, and Mike, I don't know if you have watched Adam Randall at all, but my thing with him is that I would be really intrigued with bringing him in. My question for the Patriots would be, do you see your running back room in stable enough condition, or is there at least another player that you, like a veteran, that you could bring in that you feel like it's in stable enough condition to go ahead and put a draft pick into Randall, where he is a little bit more of a projection because he's new to the position. And I don't want to call him a gadget guy per se, but it's not like he's a plug and play NFL running back either. So if you're taking a guy that you're expecting to be part of a rotation right away and he's learning the position, where do they feel like that room is at that they currently have? That's a question I can't answer. Because like if they have like, they already had 3 running backs on the roster and they were just like, we're just going to throw this against the wall and see what happens. I could see that. There's a lot to like with what he brings from there. To me, I wonder if and that's why the Indiana guys kind of piqued my interest. Guys that were already, that I could see, there's certain guys in this class that you can see easy projections right to the next level. And I'm kind of the one guy I wanted to mention for day 3 that I really liked watching. Maybe it's I see more West Coast football than some of our listeners and viewers just living out in Scottsdale, but someone out in Oregon who caught my eye during this year was Noah Whittington, and and he's someone who caught my eye for day 3 because he's someone who can burst through the hole and also has a good little bit of physical presence to his running style. And you can not only see him projecting as a rotational running back as a rookie, he also can bring it on kick returns too. And so for a day 3 pick, he's someone who really caught my eye in Noah Whittington. But I do see a lot of guys again that you could look at. Eli Heinrich that from Navy, I would be talking about if a certain someone was still the head coach here. But but there's a lot of running backs I see day 3, Mike, where you could say you could take a toolsy, again, kind of like the quarterback situation. You could take a toolsy guy and see what happens. But you could also make the case that they really struggled in short yardage running situations last year. And so that's why I keep coming back to some of these guys that are more physical ball carriers. And that's why Kalen Black from Indiana is one that I keep coming back to as the later guy that I feel like, again, used to a rotation at a high level in college. So, because any guy coming in here is not being drafted as the bell cow. So I want to look at guys as easy plug and play at that position, because with running backs, Mike, I feel like you're going to know pretty early if they're going to turn into anything. It's not, running back is not usually a position where it's like, okay, give them 2 or 3 years. If they're not going to, what's the old Bill Parcells saying? If they're not going to bark his puppies, they're not going to bite his dogs. So I think that same thing is true with running back evaluation.
That's a good one.
Yeah, that is a good one. I think you're right on the money. And look, I think that anytime you want to add to your existing positional group, your depth chart, you want to make sure you're adding something that the depth chart doesn't have, whether it be through the draft, whether it be through free agency. And I agree, that front line presence, that 2 or 3 yards that you need to get, a red zone first down or to push the ball over the plane and get the touchdown is something that I think the Patriots would love to have. They don't want to wear out someone like a Reggie Gilliam having to do that on a routine basis because you run the risk of injury. And because of the money they put out for him, he's going to be someone they're going to rely on heavily, especially in the run blocking game. He's going to have a very prominent role this year for New England. So, yeah, I think Black is someone that I would definitely keep my eye on. Steve, I love that you mentioned Randall because I spent some time watching him coming into this discussion. And it was funny because the one thing that I love about Adam, and I can see him learning the position on the field, had a conversation with a close mutual friend the other day about him a little bit. And I said, he kind of runs the way Christopher Walken talks. It's like you can see him trying to figure it out on the fly. And that doesn't mean his athleticism, because the kid has got tremendous athleticism, but it's almost like the thoughts are disconnected. And that's how Walken talks. He's like, "Oh my God, what am I going to do now?"
I cannot with that comparison right now.
Wow, there's a hole. There's a lane.
We need more cowbell.
I might have to take it. I'm not sure. Who opened that hole? Who opened that lane? What time is it? So it's like you can see that kind of progression coming along. He's still thinking like a wide receiver, but he's trying to think like a running back. So to me, I think that would be a great project. And, because I dropped that, I would love to see him here in New England. Imagine if that gets back to him. I'm sure he's going to love that. But bottom line, no, I think the Patriots could take a flyer on someone like that because of the tremendous upside that he has in his athleticism. So
I love that.
We'll see. We'll see what happens with the Patriots. But I do. I really like this running back class and some of the moves that could be made here. I don't think it's getting nearly enough attention, enough press. We'll see. Maybe maybe it starts to gain steam as April 23rd gets closer and closer, gentlemen.
I'll tell you that Christopher Walken line might have been the best.
Oh, that's classic.
That's an all-timer right there. I gotta say that one. We're gonna get to defensive ends, and I really like Cassius Howell. Although the big conversation with him is arm length, and I had flipped this program on, and I can't. It really is upsetting that I can't get proper credit because I jumped in late, heard this metaphor, and then was laughing so hard I couldn't even tell who said it. So that's why. But I was cracking up because they were saying, "Can you imagine the Patriots bringing Cassius Howell, and all of a sudden him and Will Campbell are battling out in camp, and it's like it's gonna look like two T-Rexes trying to hug each other." And I was dying laughing. And then you throw that Christopher Walken line, and those are some good comparisons. That's next.
I can't look at Randall again without thinking Christopher Walken.
I can't either, and he's a tremendous player. Like him, again, there's some guys in this class that I think it sounds kind of stupid to say, but if they either have this third running back we're talking about, or maybe like a Lan Larison isn't in the picture because who knows what they really think of him. Maybe they take one of these kind of gadget guys later because you just never know. But I still think they go with more of a traditional guy. I mentioned a couple of names. The only other two names I wanted to mention because I really did like them later: Desmond Reed from Pittsburgh, super smooth, and Jam Miller from Alabama. I do like the idea of just kind of a plug-and-play rotational running back. Steve might need it more.
I think I've taken Steve out of commission for the day.
I've totally lost my composure.
Steve,
I'm sorry. I've lost my composure.
You look a little thin in Bills, my man. What's happening? Oh my!
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Okay, so
Randall's masterpiece is dead. So he's getting ready to paint a masterpiece.
So Ian texted me some comments that have come in because I as we're going through this platform, I don't have all the comments live, so some of them have come in, and I want to go ahead and mention a couple of people. So Goodwick 101 comments in, just popping in to say hi, Derek, Steve, Mike D in the house. What's going on, man? Thank you for listening. And I'm trying to see. I'm trying to read a couple of these here, but delusional Patriots fan 9858. Contact balance is important. How is Randall out of the slot or from the backfield to put wide? And see that right there is one of those questions. That's right there is one of those questions that it really depends on the evaluation of the player, because I think with Randall, you are going to need time with him to play around with him, which in theory, because the Patriots don't have a pressing need at running back, you could take a player like that and just give it time, you know. But the question again comes back to, do they need something with a more immediate of a return? And again, I don't know what they think of the room in general. So I just something to think about. But I do want to shift over to offensive line quickly and really talk about. Well, I don't want to do it quickly per se. I just want to shift quickly because it's such a big conversation. Obviously, tackle, guard, center. I don't know if you guys want to work your inside out, outside in. We can start with tackle if we want to, because we obviously it's a big conversational piece. And I'll go right into it here. The Patriots have been very, very publicly supportive of Will Campbell being the left tackle. And I think that moving him after 1 year, after selecting him as high as they did, would be a mistake anyway. Vrabel said he's the left tackle. Morgan Moses is here, but we all know his aging contract situation. So I would say tackle is still absolutely a need. And depending on what they think about Will Campbell, it could be an even higher need than maybe we even believe, because I continue to see a lot of fodder, we'll call it, from people who are well in the know, national draft people who are well in the know, that keep mentioning the Patriots really being highly interested in some of these tackle prospects. And we shift back to an earlier conversation that we have about 5-6 tackle prospects going, and then maybe a big gap. Well, not only do the Patriots have an opportunity to maybe get one of those at 31, but they could be in a situation where they might actually have to move up if they really feel like tackle is a position. They might have to move up a couple of picks, or they could be in a position where maybe they have to move up from the second or third round a couple of picks with some of those later day 3 picks that they have. So, Mike, where do you think the Patriots are with offensive tackle? How pressing do you think the need is, and how legitimately do you think it is an option for the Patriots to take a tackle at 31 overall in the first round here in a few weeks?
I don't want to say it's impossible, because I do think it's a need, and I identified it as one of those sneaky needs on the roster right now that really hasn't been addressed. The Patriots don't have a bona fide swing tackle on this roster right now. I know they just signed James to come in and to be that guy that's going to kind of compete for that job, but you got to wonder with the penalty situation and the difficulties he's had, if that's going to be a fit. Caden Wallace continues to be a mystery on this team. Is he going to be a swing guard, a swing tackle? How is that going to work? There aren't a lot of bona fide options that give you that capability. And look, Derek, I think you said this very eloquently. Morgan Moses is not getting any younger. There were retirement rumors surrounding him this year. Do you want to make sure that you have a guy that's going to be capable of bookending Will Campbell? Because the Patriots seem to be very happy with Campbell at left tackle. And I know there were rumors flying around yesterday that left tackle was more of a need for the Patriots than they're letting on. I don't necessarily know how much I put into those. I'm not saying they're inaccurate reports by any stretch, just saying I haven't heard anything to support that at this point. But I think it's always interesting, especially when you're still developing your top-level franchise quarterback. And I think a lot of people forget that in the season he had last year. Drake May still has yet to hit his prime. He's yet to hit his stride. He still needs development in his game to reach his full potential. So you want to make sure that the line in front of him is giving him every opportunity to grow into his greatness. And on that basis, I wouldn't say any pick would be too high right now to consider the tackle position. So, yeah, I think it could be 31. I don't think they'll go that direction at 31, but you look at day 2 and you look at the second round, third round, yeah, I think absolutely you're looking at best tackle available at that point, and I don't think the Patriots would hesitate to make that move.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm with you on that. Steve, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I just look again. They've made it very clear that Will Campbell is their left tackle. I mean, Vrabel has said it. Elliot Wolf said it. I don't see left tackle even being a consideration at this point. Now, if Campbell comes out and struggles this year, absolutely they'll look at that, but that won't be till 2027. And we know Morgan Moses is getting up there. He was remarkably durable last year, but you can't bank on that at
Bingo.
age 35. We don't know how they feel about Marcus Bryant. I mean, that's the one guy they haven't really mentioned, right, much this offseason.
Very good point.
So we'll see how he plays into this. But I just don't see them using, and we'll talk about more of this later, but I don't see them using the number 31 pick in the first round on a right tackle that they don't envision playing this year. I mean,
And
look,
that's your biggest, but that is your biggest rub, though, Steve, is the fact that you just don't think they're in a position to take a player that can sit out a year.
Well, it's like, are you going to use your top pick in the draft with the guy that you don't even envision playing this year? I don't see.
I think in a perfect world, you get to a spot through roster building where you can take a player in the first round.
Yeah, I think if you're loaded and you're, say for instance, they dominated Seattle in the Super Bowl, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just as a for instance, and they're Super Bowl champs and all that, and everything is rosy and unicorns and show ponies, whatever. Then yeah, okay, I could see that. But they still have holes to fill, and I don't think right tackle is as big as a hole on the roster, or as big as a need as edge rusher is.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't see them saying, "Oh, look, we're going to draft a guy at 31, but we're going to sit him all year because Morgan Moses is still a viable guy." I don't see them doing that. Will they address right tackle? Absolutely, and they need to. They need to have a guy that they can develop as your right tackle of the future, and get a guy that could conceivably play swing tackle in 2026. But I just don't see them doing that at 31.
Yeah, I could see a scenario. I could see a scenario where they do take a tackle, but it would surprise me.
I'm not saying it's out of the.
No, I know what you're saying. I'm just it would surprise me because I feel the same way. I just think that they're in a position. They're in this weird kind of fluid position, Mike, where it's like their roster's in better shape than it was a couple years ago. So it's not like they're sitting in a rowboat and they're holding a plug, but there's 5 leaks. You know what I mean? So apparently we're just going to go with metaphors today.
I love it.
But they aren't really in a situation where they have the luxury where, say, they get into like we're kind of like the Eagles are now, where the Ravens have been, where the Patriots were at one point when they were really, really good, where it's like you want to, if you can set up your team to where you are just loaded, you can either let a guy go get highly paid on the market and just draft a first rounder and just plug play and call it. Or you can draft a player where you're like, this is a rotational piece. He's an edge rusher. We have 2 starting guys, but now we can rotate a third guy in, get his feet wet, and then he can take a full starting role in 2027. I think that's a position where you'd like to be in. The problem is that the same case you could make for tight end, or tackle, you could make for tight end. You could make an edge rusher. One injury, one issue with 6, 7, 8 positions on this team right now, and you could make the case that need jumps to the top of the list because, and that sounds dramatic, but that's kind of where the roster is right now. I think that they're in good position again on paper, but there's still going to be a lot more that they're going to overturn. They still have a lot more talent they need to go ahead and bring into the roster, and they're not very deep. They're surface level at a lot of positions, and you lose that top tier guy, and it really throws you down a rung. So it's tough to picture this team selecting a player that wouldn't have an immediate starting impact in 2026. I guess is how we go about that. Steve, tackle or 2 that caught your eye for a day 1 option for the Patriots?
Well, if they do go that route, right? Caden Proctor from Alabama. I mean, he's enormous. He's like 6'7", 350 pounds. right? But for a guy as big as he is, he moves pretty well, and he's pretty athletic. A lot of people have mocked them with Caleb Lomu from Utah. I think he's another guy that could possibly be, on their radar. And of course, we saw Mike Vrabel working out at Arizona State yesterday or a couple of days ago with Max. And I know I'm going to butcher his last name, but how is it? A Hyenacor? Whatever. But you know who I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And he's another guy that's mocked Patriots very early, at number 31. Blake Miller, another guy from Clemson. We've seen all these names mocked to them. And I think if they're going to take a tackle at 31, every one of those names, if they're available, would be guys that would definitely fit.
Yeah, I think those are some good names. Mike, over to you.
Yeah, I love the names that Steve, dropped. And, anytime you get a viral video on social media of you working out with Mike Vrabel, you're on the radar. So Hyenacor is probably someone that they're keeping a sharp eye on at this point. To that point, if they're going to go developmental, why not look in their backyard over at Chestnut Hill? Jude Bowery had a great workout earlier this week. I really love what this kid brings to the table. 6'5", 314 pounds, an elite athlete for a kid his size. Really, I think, scored well when it came to his relative athletic score. Broad jump, the vertical jump, this kid can do it all. And I think he proved that, you succeed in a Bill O'Brien type system, you're going to be able to have success at the pro level. So Bowery is someone that I can look at and say, I think the Patriots would be interested in going the developmental route there. Another guy is Markel Bell out of the University of Miami. Another guy that's enormous, I think 6'9", 346 pounds for Bell. That is a mountain of a man. You want some size there. You want some, a solid wall. That is an irresistible force and an immovable object at the same time. So, yeah, I think New England has a lot of different ways that they can go here. Steve, I'm with you. I don't think necessarily that because of the need they have at edge rush and some of the other needs that they have on this team that they're necessarily going to push the envelope in at 31 to take a tackle. And Derek, to your point, if there are similar needs and similar ways that you can deploy the tight end position, the tackle position, the defensive line, all areas where they need some help, you've got to go with the positional group that has the deepest talent pool in this draft right now. And tight end may edge the tackles a little bit. So, yeah, I think it's going to be interesting to see how the Patriots address this decision and how they're going to move forward here. I absolutely think they will address it, but how they're going to do it is still a matter of conjecture.
Yeah, I think you guys both threw out some good names there. I mean, a couple of them right off the top. I mean, Francis Mauigoa from Miami, love him. The Patriots would absolutely have to trade up for him.
Oh yeah, he'll be off early.
He's going to be off early. He's a badass. There's a couple of prospects that I really like in this class. I think Lomu and I would say Lomu is really interesting because of his athletic profile. You can see how his game translates to the pro level at today's game specifically. But being out in Arizona, he's been a player that's been on my radar for quite a while. I would say that Caden Proctor, again, in that first round, really intriguing as just an enormous player, as Steve alluded to, and we've talked about. You get into round, I do think the BC connection that you mentioned is a huge one. I do think that, it's funny when you see Vrabel doing some of these workouts, some of these guys that he's traveling around and working out, you can see how invested he is into it. I think that tackle is absolutely on the table for day two. But I mean, you could say the same, but you could say the same thing in that same position You can see the same thing about tackle that you do for tight end or linebacker too. And at the end of the day, it's a musical chairs, and only so many positions are going to be filled because you only have so many picks. So that'll be interesting because that's the ultimate where does the board fall scenario, and that's where I think they pick up the pieces in Greenwood, depending on when the music stops, so to speak. So if we're looking at day two, rounds 2 and 3, Mike, where do your where do you, does is there anyone else that you would want to mention in that category as we're looking more at day 2 before we jump into day 3?
In terms of tackle, I think that I think we've covered some of the names. I would probably say I know somebody that Patriots fans may have an intrigue on. I don't know how deep into day 3 he's going to last, but Emil Wagner out of Notre Dame, he could be someone that has a good amount of experience, a good amount of leadership that he had over at Notre Dame, being a team captain for a little while. There's still some work that I think he needs for his footwork, and that would be where Doug Marrone would come in and try to help him out a little bit. He could be an option. If you're looking to go for a guard, I love Georgia linemen. I always have. Thank our good friend Andrew Caraway for really turning me on to that pool of talent that just continuously seems to churn out great linemen year after year after year. Michael Morris, I think, is someone that could look good in this line, having previous experience playing alongside Jared Wilson. So you look at guys that they've tried to draft before and guys they've tried to bring in. These could be options for the New England Patriots along the offensive line. There's plenty of talent out there. The question is, how do they want to go about filling those spots? But those are two guys that I'd look at for potential day 3 prospects.
Yeah, and I think those are that makes a lot of sense there. Going back to Lowry though, the reason that one, I mean, there's a lot of reasons why that one caught your eye, obviously, but you can see where he's going to be projected, where I think they're going to be ending up selecting a tackle, and that's why that one I kind of have a little asterisk next to.
Me too.
So, Steve, as you're talking about either kind of later day 2, working into day 3 prospects, anyone catch your eye that you wanted to talk about?
Well, I'm glad both of you guys mentioned Bowery because he's on my he's on my very first mock draft. So I really like him. I think again, you're looking at a guy who played for Bill O'Brien, so Mike Vrabel has that connection there, and I think he's a worthy guy. Now, if you're looking at somebody, for the interior, you're looking at depth guys, right? Jaden Roberts, the guard out of Alabama, another massive dude, right? He's like 6'5", 335 pounds. Really good physical tools when it comes to pass protection. And with Elijah Vera-Tucker's injury history, right? Could you see them going after an interior guy? I think this guy, if you're looking at somebody that, they could develop, I think that's a guy that just pops off the tape for me. So, but I like all the names that we've talked about, and look, it's going to be intriguing how they decide to go about this.
Yeah, and I do think you're looking at, if you're looking later in the draft, to me, day 3 tackles, you're talking about let's get balls of clay, because you can't teach size, and there's a lot of teams that take, there's a lot of players in day 3 for offensive tackles and really offensive linemen in general that I feel like kind of fall into the category of why am I blanking on the young guy they have on their roster, Marcus Bryant? Like, you can't teach his size. So it's like, well, we'll see if he can, let's see if he can come in. Where there's a player, who came out of the draft a couple of years ago for the Packers, who came out of college playing a bunch of different positions, and and that's Zach Tom. Like, where it's like, do you want a guy who has a lot of positional versatility that you feel like you can plug and play? maybe he hasn't found a home yet, and you're hoping he does. In Zach Tom's case, he did, and he turned into and he excelled. So I think that's really kind of an interesting guy. The one guy I want to mention late is Drew Shelton from Penn State, just because his athletic profile. Penn State had two very good running backs in college. He's a former tight end. So to me, if you are at all worried about Will Campbell as maybe a future tackle, which again, the reports nationally kind of indicate that the Patriots are more worried about him at long-term tackle after quote unquote being exposed in the Super Bowl. I've seen that phrase a lot, which means that they're trying to publicly support Campbell, but maybe they're a little bit more worried about the future than maybe they're alluding to now. I don't know. But Shelton to me kind of is a different profile. So if you are going to worry about Campbell, but you want to give him another shot, do you take a guy like Shelton later in the draft to go ahead and say, if Campbell doesn't work out this year, we could potentially move him to guard and get an athletic guy to him to the left with a bigger frame that you can give him a year to kind of sit and go from there. Or if Campbell works out, maybe you let Shelton kind of play that. They already kind of have that swing guy after the Hudson signing, but you have some time to go ahead and get him some rest, know the system, not some rest and development, learn the system, and maybe you shift him to the right tackle after 1 year when Morgan Moses, maybe they re-up him, maybe he moves on, maybe he retires, who knows, but he could be your right tackle in 2027. So I think that's where that conversation gets interesting. As we pivot to the interior, gentlemen, there's a lot of moving parts here. You're hoping that Elijah Vera-Tucker stays healthy. You're hoping that Jared Wilson can find a home at center, where he was playing guard, but we did think his long-term projection was going to be center. But you still have to worry about that move a little bit because he had a rough Super Bowl too. But you'd like to think if Vera-Tucker was healthy and Mike Onwenu playing at the level we expect him to, it would help Jared Wilson to sandwich him with two very good veteran players on either side. So I think at center, I'm looking like that's going to be okay. We know what Ben Brown can do, but Mike Onwenu contract hasn't been restructured, so he has one more year left on his contract there. And with Vera-Tucker, with the injury history, I do think that you could be looking at guard potentially for some more depth. I don't see this position as being one that they draft very highly up, especially with the potential of Will Campbell moving to guard if he doesn't work out at tackle too, which I know we're not expecting to happen, but I just feel like I have to say it because it's a factor. So, Mike, where do you see guard or center filling in for the Patriots this year? Do you think it's more of a day three depth on the interior, or do you see that being a higher need than some others do?
Definitely with along the interior, I think is a high need. In terms of center, obviously, I mean, they have a need for a backup center right now. I mean, there's no question about it. They're putting all their eggs in the Jared Wilson basket, and it's understandable. A name that keeps popping in my head, and I don't believe he's going to be there when the Patriots want to take a player of this type. I don't think it's a logistical fit right now in terms of how the board's going to play and where the Patriots need to focus their energy. But they recently brought on John DeCosta, who was an offensive line coach with the University of Florida, did a number of great things there, and there are a few prospects that are coming out of this draft that are offensive line prospects that could end up being solid pros. He worked very closely with center Jake Slaughter. Now, Slaughter is working his way up the chain of command when it comes to draft boards and when it comes to areas that this guy can be taken. But, boy, what a fit in New England this kid would make if he was willing to sit for a little while and see if Wilson doesn't work out and they need to kick him back to a guard position. Maybe they move him over to right side if Michael Onwenu walks in free agency in a couple of years and they put Slaughter into the center position. DeCosta coached him to one of the top linemen in the conference. So These are all little moves and things that the Patriots could potentially do to try to solidify that line for future consideration. But for right now, yeah, I would say interior would probably be more of meaning the guard positions would be more of a priority than trying to bring in a center. I think if you're going to back someone up, if you're going to back up a guy like Jared Wilson, you bring in a solid veteran that's going to be able to do it. I think that would be a better way to develop his skill set rather than having potentially a young kid waiting in the wings to try to take his job. It's a very easy way to kill someone's confidence, and I don't think the Patriots want to go that route right now.
Yeah, no, I think that's well said. Steve, thoughts on what Mike just shared?
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I mean, look, you drafted Wilson last year to be your center of the future, and by all accounts, they said like last year he actually, even though he was playing left guard, that he would prepared like he was going to play center. I don't think at this point you bring in a young center. I think Ben Brown would be the guy that would fill that role if Wilson struggled or was hurt or anything like that. But yeah, I don't see them drafting a center this year at all. But yeah, I think you could always make the argument that that they bring in a guard either in the draft, undrafted guy, or a veteran who's going to be out there after the draft. So we'll see what happens.
Oh, sorry. Now I lost my headphones here. So I think you both put it perfectly. I think that there are some intriguing guys in this class, though. I'll say that. I mean, the Penn State guard is just lights out, and Pregnon from Oregon is phenomenal too. I really want to say the Penn State guard's name, but it's one of those things where I can read the pronunciation and I can hear it and I can say it, but it's like if I try to go ahead and lay it out, it's like if I just call him Vega, I feel like it's easier to just condense the first name down shorter. but it's a hard name for me to say. But he is a badass. And I could easily see a scenario where he's just a plug and play day one stud. But anyway, as far as later guys go, any names specifically that either one of you two want to throw out there that anyone that hasn't been mentioned or anything like that? No? Mike, anyone else?
No, I think we've covered those guys. Those are the guys that are on my list right now.
Yeah, no, I think you guys did a good job of kind of laying out some guys. I do think it'll be interesting. You're wanting to add more depth and some insurance there along the offensive line. I would say with the Patriots offensive line, on paper, I'm fine with it. The problem is the game's played on paper. And there's a lot of variables. And again, it's another position where it is kind of a house of cards a little bit with. So I think depth is incredibly important. For time's sake, we'll just condense this last part a little bit. Steve, you have something being posted to PatsFans.com tomorrow. Do you want to share what you're posting and just talk about it real quick, and then Mike and I can share our thoughts, and we'll end the show with that.
Yeah, really quickly, because I know Ian's going to kill us for going late.
Uh-huh.
But,
yep.
But I did my first mock draft, and I based it off a couple of assumptions. You know what happens when you make assumptions, right? But look, I based it off of, I don't think they're going to take a tackle at 31 for the reasons we discussed. And I do think that they're going to make a trade for A.J. Brown, right? So, and I know we're all tired of talking about that particular situation, but so in this mock draft, the first one I did, I'll just talk about my first two draft picks, which was, I think they're going to go edge at number one. R. Mason Thomas from Oklahoma. Mm-hmm. I think they have the big physical dudes that set the edge in Dre'Mont Jones and Harold Landry. They need that speed, dynamic pass rusher. I think I think Thomas is going to be one of those guys that initially he's going to be a situational guy, but they need that speed guy to come off the edge. So he was number 31. And I went against the grain because I wasn't going to take a wide receiver in the first couple of rounds because I thought they were going to bring in Brown. But I looked at it. Guy came up available. I think what they're going to look for if they do draft a wide receiver and they get Brown was a guy that could play in the slot. And I think the guy that I took at number 63 can play in the slot and a bunch of other places. And that Jeremy Bernard from Alabama. You guys know I love my Alabama guys. But, and again, he's not a typical slot guy. He's bigger. He's 6'1", 210, but he's versatile. He can play out wide. He can play in the Z. But I think he fits best in the slot. And look, he's not a burner. He ran a 4.48, but his 3-cone drill, 6.71, that means he's quicker than fast. He's a polished route runner. He only had 4 drops and 232 targets. I think he's your slot guy of the future. And I just wanted to share with everybody, we have a special podcast coming up on Monday with a very special guest. I think people will really enjoy that. So stay tuned.
Yeah, Steve, thanks for sharing that part and also for what you're posting on Pats Fans tomorrow. So, Mike, I'll share my thoughts and then you can share yours and take us out. So, yeah, we are doing a show on Monday, as Steve alluded to, with a special guest. So stay tuned for that. That will be going. What time are we doing that, gentlemen? I forget. What's the third? Yeah, 2:30 2:30 Eastern time. So if you're around 2:30 Eastern on Monday, join us. If not, be sure to hit that subscribe button and to follow us, whether it's Apple Music, Spotify, YouTube. Be sure to check that out. It'll be a good one. As far as Steve's situation goes, I'll leave the AJ Brown stuff alone. Lord knows we've talked enough about that. Bernard is a fascinating prospect, Steve, and I do think that's a fun player to envision again in this offense. And I do like I do think the 3-cone time does translate well to that level. And R. Mason Thomas, here's my issue with R. Mason Thomas. It's not even the player. I really like him too. My biggest thing is I am certainly worried about him a little bit because it seems like I'm much higher on him than a lot of other people are, but I see his role, if I'm projecting him to the Patriots, exactly the way you did, as a guy who can bring a speed element kind of in that Harold Landry mold, and you're hoping that he's a contributor and role player in year one, and that he takes on a bigger role in year two. We know that edge is a position that could certainly use another body at, and I think Thomas brings a skill set and a play style that I think would just give a little more buzz and dynamic playmaking ability in that front seven and be a nice complement to what they already have, because they want to build a front seven that terrorizes people, and they've done a good job of doing that so far. So Mike, your thoughts on what Steve just shared, and take us out, bud.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Steve right again, seldom wrong and right again, my friend. I think that when you look at the need for edge rush on this team, 31 seems to be the area where they would go. I think they'd even entertain the idea of trading up. I think they believe it is that important to the success of this team coming up. So which way will they go? Will it be a guy like Cassius Howell of Texas A&M, who we've talked about? Steve, I think you make a good point about Mason. I think he could be an option as well. Zion Young is someone out of Missouri that could end up being an option there as well. Even Akeem Mesidor, somebody that they scouted during the combine and recently had his pro day, didn't participate in some of the measurables, but did some drills and looked solid doing that. Elliott Wolf was in attendance for Miami's pro day. You can bet he was a guy that he kept his sharp eye on. So once again, folks, continue to watch, because we're going to be previewing all the positions here on Patriots No Huddle. And let us know what your thoughts are on the positions that we've broken down so far, whether it be tight ends whether it be the tight ends, wide receivers from the other day with Steve and Derek, or whether it be the offensive linemen, the quarterbacks, or the running backs that we've talked about here today. Drop us a note in the comments section below. We'd love to hear your thoughts. On behalf of my good friend and colleague, Derek Havens, my Patriots paisan, Steve Balistrieri, and the great Christopher Walken, who made a brief, how do I say, appearance today on this episode because of his likeness to one Adam Randall. I'm Mike Debate, reminding all of you to stay safe, stay well, be the change you wish to see in the world. Have a great day, everyone. We'll see you back here again next time on